Sorry about that. Hi, guys. Welcome. I'm Dr. Camila Williams. It's a pleasure to be here today. We're going to talk a little bit about perfectionism. Hopefully you can all see that screen. I call it the freedom shift, right? How to overcome perfection paralysis and burnout so you can go after your big dreams boldly and imperfectly. And so please, throughout this presentation, feel free to hop into the chat so that I, know that I got people with me, because I actually can't see any of your faces. Okay, so, if you're just joining, I'm Dr. Camila Williams. Hi, Fabian. Calling in from Mexico. All right, I can see you guys coming in the chat. Yeah, let us know, your name, where you guys are joining us from, so we can see who's all in the room with us today. For me, I'm Dr. Camila Williams, and whether you guys are world travelers or writers, maybe you're a business owner, a coach, or consultant, this is the place to be, to hopefully learn some more ways that you can go after your big dreams boldly and imperfectly, right? I want to help you put to bed once and for all procrastination, second guessing, self-doubt, anything to help you stop the endless pivot and this exhausting cycle of perfectionism. Perfect. We've got Evan from San Diego. Welcome. Glad to see everybody joining in today. Okay. A little bit about me. I am a board certified psychologist and cognitive behavioral specialist, and I've been teaching this formula for over 10 years, right? I've helped working parents juggle multiple roles, business professionals, small business owners, entrepreneurs, military veterans, all helping them learn how to break free from what I call the shackles of perfectionism, anxiety, and stress. And today in this masterclass, I kind of want to teach you some of the tips from this freedom shift. Welcome, Michaela from Italy. Glad to have you here. Awesome. Now, if you're not familiar with me, I've led community wellness workshops in collaboration with the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. I've taught university classes. I've worked with military veterans and VA hospitals, and I've consulted on mental health and wellness for companies like Google. I'm also a self-professed perfectionist in recovery. So when it comes to perfectionism, I get it. I really do. As a mother of three, I understand only too well this balance between striving for excellence and crippling self-doubt. In fact, my relentless drive for perfection led to me almost getting kicked out of graduate school because of my belief that I was not good enough. Okay? This led to serious procrastination, missed deadlines, overdue projects. I'm just wondering, anyone here, can anyone relate to this feeling of not being good enough, constantly second guessing yourself? If you guys can relate, let us know in the chat so you guys can see that you're not alone. Yep, we've got, yeah. You can also private message us if you don't want to share in the chat with everyone else. Okay? Anyone here, right, who maybe you can't help but look around, right, and you keep comparing yourself to everyone around you, right? Constantly judging your progress, right? Maybe you're asking yourself things like, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? What are others going to think? Are they going to judge me? And even, are they going to laugh at me? Okay. This often leads to what I call the self-help junkie trap, right? This is where you consume great books, webinars, and courses with the intent to make changes in your life, but you're never quite able to translate thought into action, right? This is where perfectionists pay a steep price from investing a lot of time getting ready to be ready. One more draft, one more course, one more certificate, one more review before launching or doing something, right? For example, let's say you procrastinate by spending 3 hours a week learning online or finding other ways of getting ready. Okay. This amounts to 156 hours a year that you spent getting ready to be ready to launch or act on those ideas that you have. Now, let's just say you charge $100 per hour for your services, right? This works out to $15,600 worth of your time in lost productivity getting ready. Now, you may feel like you're actually getting somewhere, making progress, right? Because you're learning. But in reality, you're just hiding, Sorry. I know that might sound harsh, but it's the truth. And the truth is, and trust me, I get it because it takes one to know one, right? Is that the learning, the always getting ready, this is a way to procrastinate, okay? While you still get to feel like you're being productive. It's a way to avoid putting your work or yourself out there for fear that it's not going to be good enough or that you're going to be judged. And of course, this can also manifest as this eternal pivot. Okay, this is when perfectionists actually do launch their ideas. What happens? What happens here is that when things don't turn out the way they planned or as expected, or you're not getting the results as quickly as you would like, you might be really quick to just kind of throw your hands up and pivot, and then pivot and pivot again. Perfectionists are especially prone to doing this. So just as an example, let's say you spend $300 on Facebook ads to drive traffic to your Facebook group. When you don't get the hundreds of people joining your group that you expected, perfectionists tend to catastrophize, globalize, and jump to conclusions, right? They'll say things like, oh, Facebook ads don't work for me. They don't work for this business. Facebook ads will never work. Right, so they pivot and they try something different, usually at a great emotional and financial cost. For example, in the United States, the Small Business Administration did a general survey of startups, and they found that most micro businesses cost around $3,000 to start up. So every time a perfectionist starts and pivots and shelves yet another idea, they lose on average $3,000 as they leave that project behind and go in a new direction. Now, I just want to ask you a rhetorical question, okay? How many ideas or projects have you started and then left behind? Okay. How much has it cost you, maybe in cold hard cash, right? But more importantly, in terms of the internal struggles, the self-criticism, self-doubt, right? That all of this pivoting causes, okay? Now, some of you might still be thinking, you know what? This is all worth the price of perfection and excellence in the work that I produce. Okay? You might even wear it as a badge of honor, right? Perhaps you believe that perfectionism drives you to achieve more, to do more, right? After all, right, this is why you're so good at what you do. It's how you get things done and how you accomplish so much. But the truth is, perfectionism actually undermines your true potential. And there is science to back this up. Okay? In 2018, they did a meta-analysis of over 25,000 working professionals in the US, and they actually found that perfectionists do not outperform non-perfectionists in the workplace. Okay, let me slow down, let that sink in. You heard that right. In fact, it was high achievers are the ones who actually outperform perfectionists. And here's the kicker. Not only are perfectionists constantly placing second to the high achievers, they also experience more burnout. And this is one of the things that I teach, right? I teach people how to think more like a high achiever and less like a perfectionist. Now, this study also found that perfectionism and performance at work were not related, and that perfectionists work longer hours, experience higher levels of depression, anxiety, and burnout than the non-perfectionists. So in other words, right, perfectionists were not any better than high achievers in their jobs, even though they spent way more time working and suffered more. I'm just curious. Anyone here until this moment, maybe you wore perfectionism as a badge of honor, where you genuinely felt that this is what was helping you achieve more at a higher standard? Now, this is a guilt-free zone, okay? What I want you to know is that if you're struggling with procrastination, perfectionism, not good enough syndrome, you are not alone. Okay, I get this on a personal level. Okay, I've been there. I've suffered the burnout both physically and emotionally because of my perfectionism. Yes, thank you. Referring to the chat here, you guys, right? That right there is a photo. You can see my twin and her twin brother holding the bottle at the top of the picture. You know, huge messes, nothing perfect about this situation. For me, it was actually the physical breakdown of my health due to all of the stress and overwhelm that kind of forced me, it was my saving grace because it forced me to make changes, to really learn how to fix myself. And I've been able to use what I've learned to then help others and the clients that I work with. This is why I now specialize in this ever-growing, not good enough mindset that I'm seeing among some of our nation's most talented people like you guys, right? Who struggle with this perfectionist mindset. You see, perfectionism, it's not a personality trait. Okay? It's a learned behavior. It's actually a psychological defense mechanism. Okay? It's a way that we learn to manage our stress and anxiety. It's how we try to manage how other people perceive us. And it's a way that you've learned to try to control the way that things turn out, right? It's this thought, if I do everything just right, then everything will be good. And because it's a learned behavior, you would think, right, that learning some new tactics through all of the self-help would actually help rein in this perfectionism. But for many of my clients, they've tried so many things before, okay? They've tried prayer, they've tried meditation, they've tried countless courses in personal development. Now, don't get me wrong, these are all wonderful mindset techniques, and I do incorporate a lot of them when I'm working people through the freedom shift. But what I find is that perfectionists, when left to their own devices, usually can't stick with the techniques like meditation long enough to realize the benefits. Their inner critic starts to sabotage their efforts to change. Okay? However, when you take a lot of those wonderful techniques from self-help, like the meditation, and you add in some of the cognitive behavioral methods that I teach, this transformation from burned out, exhausted, overwhelmed to calm, focused, and driven is honestly astounding. And the best part is that the results are long lasting and permanent. You see, the problem with trying to change only your mindset is that the perfectionist brain self-sabotages your attempts to put what you read from all the self-help into action. Okay, things like, I got to do all the things, and you get overwhelmed, so you don't do any of the things. Right? And when the results from the things that you're trying don't come fast enough, the perfectionist typically just gives up, kind of like that eternal pivot that we talked about previously, right? Perfectionists are quicker to give up when they're not getting things the way they expected it to be or fast enough, and they're going to pivot to something else, and that kind of leaves them stuck in this spiral of what I call self-help. They also tend to have this all or nothing mentality, right? Which means if I don't get the results immediately, if I can't implement everything I've learned perfectly, then you know what? Might as well not do anything at all. Does anyone here experience this? Just kind of curious. Put into the chat, let us know if you've ever gotten stuck in this bit of like, I got to do all the things or I won't do any of it all, okay? Or maybe you've tried to manage your stress, your overwhelm, your burnout. Maybe you've turned to prayer, meditation, all the self-help books, but you kind of struggled to get to a real solution that was working for you. Okay, we got a few people. Yeah. Thank you, baby. All right. So this is extremely frustrating and also very lonely, because in the end, it's just you and your thoughts trying to fix you and your thoughts. And this is why the problem exists. So what can we do about it, right? And that's what I want to talk about today. I urge you to keep an open mind. I want to go over like, what's the number one reason why we procrastinate and what can we start to do about it? Okay. And one of those things is going over the 3 key questions to ask yourself to stop this imposter syndrome in its tracks, overcome the perfection paralysis, and achieve more with less stress. Hopefully this will be a huge aha moment for you, and something that you're going to want to pay close attention to when it comes to overcoming perfectionism and procrastination so that you can launch your big ideas. Now, I say this because while everyone procrastinates, okay, we all do it on some level, a lot of research studies have found that 1 in 5 adults are chronic procrastinators. Yeah. And during these regular bouts of procrastination, they lose on average 218 minutes procrastinating a day. This amounts to 55 days of lost time every year. Okay? 55 days. That is 7.5 weeks that you could be going on holiday, writing your book, launching a program, learning another language, or my favorite, relaxing guilt-free. Okay? I want you guys to think about. Share in the chat. I'm curious, what would you guys do with a 14-month year? If you had an extra 7.5 weeks of downtime, what would you want to spend it on? I'm just kind of curious what comes up for folks. Traveling, yoga retreats, writing. Yep. Oh, we got one person. That's right. Learning another language. Isn't that great just to think about what could I do with all this extra time? And we don't usually think of this time in terms of like, wow, it's an extra 7.5 weeks, because we let the minutes go by during the day. It's like, oh, 218 minutes a day, and it just disappears. So my goal here is to help you end the kind of this exhausting behavior that's draining you of your time and energy with those catastrophizing thought patterns like, this didn't work, so nothing's ever going to work, right? To help you end this all or nothing approach of always jumping to conclusions, these thought patterns that undermine your personal peace, your confidence, and your abilities. Okay. Anybody here, right? Want to get more done without constantly second guessing yourself or procrastinating? I know I do. That's because procrastination, okay, putting things off until the right time, until you finally feel ready, this is actually one of the most common and insidious signs of perfectionism. Okay, a lot of people will be like, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm like, let's look at those procrastination behaviors. It usually clues me in fairly quickly as to what's going on, right? They'll say things like, just for example here, I'll write my book when I have 2 quiet hours a day to sit down, right? Or I'll get on video and post on social media when I lose weight or finally get the clothes that I want. Or I'll share my website when I get the copy just right, right? There's always a reason to procrastinate, to put things off. And underlying that is usually this streak of perfectionism, okay? And then by the end of our time today, after I go over some of the things, I do have a free gift, a guidebook to share with you guys, if that's okay with everyone. So let's dive in, okay? We're gonna go straight into this masterclass. You can take notes. This is the formula, the approach that I've used in my work with parents and veterans and working professionals to help them, right, kind of reach this creative potential and not hold themselves back with more energy and efficiency, right? My goal is always to help people achieve more and stress less. And I'm hoping you guys are going to love it. So the freedom shift formula. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, right, well, perfectionism has gotten me this far. It can't really be that bad. Okay. So it's important. Let's take a look at the untamed perfectionism, how that can impact your life, your business, your personal life. In addition to some of the statistics that I shared earlier about the working professionals, okay, there's a lot of research that shows that perfectionism leads to depression. Okay. It's because this chronic inner critic, the second guessing, the feeling not good enough, it all takes an emotional toll. In addition, perfectionism can also happen in one specific area of your life while all the other areas of your life take a hit. So for example, you can be a perfectionist at work and it takes up all of your time and energy, and you know what? Things at work are great, but your home life is chaotic and disorganized because you have no energy left to take care of that part of your life. Right? Anyone relate to any of that? Okay. You can also be a perfectionist in your eating and your exercise habits to the point of obsession, and then your relationships start to take a hit. Okay. Or maybe you're a perfectionist in terms of cleaning and organizing and everything looks great, but nothing that actually matters is getting done. You can be a perfectionist in your grooming and appearance, right? But maybe you never enjoy the social interactions because you're always worried about how you look. Okay. Which one of these do you guys resonate with? Are you a perfectionist at work, your diet and fitness, at home, and your appearance? Or maybe it's something else, right? The idea here is that perfectionism can look differently for different people. You just want to kind of reflect and think back, where is this showing up in my life and how is it leading to perfection paralysis, burnout, and procrastination. Okay. Now, here's the elephant in the room. Perfectionism is actually about control. It's about controlling how other people perceive us. Okay. So let's take procrastination, right? If I procrastinate and I run out of time and things don't turn out right, then I have an excuse, right? It wasn't me, right? It's not that there's something wrong with me. I just didn't have enough time, right? This actually lets me protect my self-image, right? It's a psychological defense. And that's why a lot of perfectionists will procrastinate. Because if I give it my all and I really try really hard and it doesn't work out, then other people might perceive me as not good enough. And I want to try to prevent that. It's also about controlling the outcome or results of situations. So, for example, in procrastination, it can happen when you're trying to control all the possible outcomes, right? You're trying to plan and prepare for everything and you get overwhelmed. So you freeze, right? And you procrastinate and you start putting things off because you're just overwhelmed by all the things you have to do because you're trying to control all the outcomes and you're trying to do all the things. And now, right? Just notice how that stress builds up so easily. And it's about controlling our own emotions, especially anxiety and stress. So procrastination that the perfectionists do is actually a great stress relief strategy, right? Let's say you start to worry or get anxious about something that you have to do. And as soon as your brain says, oh, let's do it later, you get an immediate hit of relief. And this is why a lot of people get stuck in the cycle of procrastination. They're actually using it to manage the stress and anxiety. Okay. Here's the kicker. The more uncertain things in the world feel, the more control we try to have, right? That's why it's particularly bad right now throughout this pandemic. We're just trying to maintain some sort of control over our own little worlds. And we believe that this actually works, right? It's this thought, if I do everything and I do it right, and if I plan for everything, then it'll be okay, right? I'll be safe and things will be okay. Can you imagine trying to plan for every single route that you see in those signs in that image, right? It's overwhelming and exhausting, right? And we know that this is not true because the more control you try to have, the more stress that builds up in your life and you end up burning out. Which brings me to the 3 things that you can do about it, right? So what do we do? Okay. First, let's step back. Perfectionists are always thinking ahead, right? You're always thinking about the next thing that needs to be done and the next thing. So even when you're trying to sit down and relax, your brain isn't letting you. You're never fully in the present moment because you're always worried about that next thing. If you're always searching for happiness out there, just one more step, one more task, it's never going to be right where you're at. And perfectionists need to learn to shift their mindset to focus on the process, on the journey, on the present. Okay. Now, I teach a whole course on this. We can go into so many details, and unfortunately, we don't have the time to get into all of that today. But in the time that you do have, I do want to help you guys flip your mindset, if that's okay, just from that busy to-do list of every day and the what's next that we tend to focus on. And instead, let's just reflect on the last 24 hours. Okay. And the reason we're going to do this is because many times, people can reach a point in their lives where they look back and they wonder, how in the world did I end up here? All right. It's because they lost sight of their values and they veered off course. And this steering off path, it isn't necessarily a dramatic event that attracts all this attention. It's usually these imperceptible, subtle things that happen minute by minute, hour by hour. Now, I want to show you what I mean. So if you have a piece of paper, a sticky note or something, or maybe open up a Word document on your computer, just a blank page, draw a line down the middle of the page. And on the left side, I want you to write down your most recent wins. Okay. I want you to think about your most recent accomplishments, the things that you've had or done that you feel really good about, really proud about. Okay. It could be maybe you landed a new client, you booked a new trip, you had a really good conversation connecting with your kid, you held your tongue and you didn't start a fight with a family member. Just take a minute. What were some of your recent wins, the things that you feel proud about? Can keep adding to that. But for those of you who are already on the right side, I want you to write out everything you did yesterday, right? From the moment you woke up, put dot, I hit the snooze button, dot, brushed my teeth, dot, took a shower, dot, got dressed, dot, made coffee, just everything you did yesterday. What did you get done yesterday, right? Maybe it was spent 3 hours on social media. So just take an inventory of the last day. Where did your time go? Okay. Now, I want you to draw a line from the right-hand side, right? Everything that you did yesterday to the thing that it contributed to, the types of wins that you listed on the left-hand side. So as an example, let's say yesterday you spent quality time with your kid, right? And in the wins you had having a meaningful connection with them was a win. So you draw a line connecting those two things, okay? Let's say yesterday you spent time making 10 cold calls and landing a strategy call was one of your wins. You draw a line connecting them. So just take a moment and see how many of the things that you spent time doing yesterday contributed to the kinds of recent wins that you feel proud of. Okay, I'll be honest. How many lines do you guys have, right? How many of the things that you actually spent time doing contributed to the kinds of things you value? Okay. See, our personal values are like our internal navigation system. If you're not living and working your personal values, it becomes exhausting trying to stay on course. And this little exercise is kind of a reminder of like, what am I living and working on? How is this contributing to where I want to end up, right? I want to end up with closer relationships with my families. What am I doing day to day that helps me get to that? Another way to kind of picture this, try to think through this, right, is let's just say, for example, you tried to fly to the moon, okay? You were off course by 1 degree, okay? If you're off course by 1 degree, you're actually going to miss the moon by over 4,000 miles, which is nearly twice the moon's diameter, okay? And it takes fuel to course correct. It takes energy to course correct. Ultimately, all that time, expense, and energy is used, and you still don't end up at the right destination. Right? Are you guys with me on this? Right? This is the importance of staying aligned with our values when we're deciding where we put our time and energy into every single day. We know that being engaged in meaningful action, right, that delivers true joy and satisfaction and is in an alignment with our values, this is what takes us hour by hour, day by day to where we want to be. This is what helps deliver peace of mind and meaningful work now rather than at the next lunar landing. Okay? So what's critical here is to align your daily tasks with what you value, with what is important to you, and also to be thinking about where am I now on this journey and not always so focused on that big old outcome that perfectionists tend to cling to. This means focusing on the process, not the outcome. Okay? And this is truly a game-changing strategy. This is what helps people move from that obsessive perfectionist to think more like a high achiever so that they can get more done with less stress and burnout. You see, perfectionists obsess over the outcome, right? I want the A+ grade. I want the gold star. I want that specific dollar figure. Whereas high achievers, they have learned how to focus on the process of getting there, right? And I'm going to go into much more detail about this in just a little bit, okay? Because here's the thing. If you're not having fun building your business or building your big ideas, you're not going to have fun once it's built, Okay. You have to learn to manage your stress and take care of yourself and enjoy your time right now if you have any hope of doing the same once you've reached your goal. What I find where most people go wrong here is that they'll say something like, when I get that promotion, then I will feel happy and successful and relieved and have time to relax. Or they'll say, when I land my first 10 clients, then I'll be able to slow down and have more time for my family. But the truth is, it never works this way. So this is where many people turn to self-help, right? Everyone's looking for the magic pill, the magic workbook. If I just hire the right person, then I can get everything done and everything will work, right? They spend all this time getting ready to be ready. Just using the meditation as an example again, right? Maybe they're trying meditation, but the problem here is that you're trying to sit there in silence, but your perfectionist brain is almost like a radio in the background. And that radio keeps playing the doomsday channel, right? It's the inner critic, and it's saying all the woulda, coulda, shouldas that you should have been doing. It's calling you out. You're doing this wrong. That's not right. You messed up. And all this just increases and amplifies our stress and interferes with the tool that we were trying to use in the first place. Now, a common misbelief with the meditation example is that meditation is about emptying your mind, but really it's about learning not to get fused with your thoughts. It's about honoring the inner chatter, not arguing with it. Now, this might sound obvious and common sense, but it's actually trickier than it seems, and that's why perfectionism is such an issue. Okay. It's also why affirmations don't usually work for perfectionists. The brain rejects that perfectionist utopia as unrealistic, unattainable, too far-fetched. Again, the inner critic is unleashed without supervision. Which brings us to learning to focus on growing rather than achieving. This is another way, like, how do I focus on the process, not the outcome? It's focusing on growing rather than achieving, okay? It's kind of like you have a high standard but low expectations. And I know a lot of perfectionists in the room might have been, what are you talking about, okay? And I understand it kind of might be counterintuitive, especially if you're an overachiever. But the truth is that this is actually the key to getting more done at a higher level while stressing less, okay? You see, like I mentioned earlier, perfectionists are very much attached to the outcome, the end result of something, right? Because if they get an A+ or a gold star or some kind of recognition, that means they have value. That means people like them. That means they are accepted. And the problem with this is when you stare at that looming gold star right on the top of that mountain, that's all you focus on. Suddenly you start to feel the weight of that mountain on your shoulders, and it becomes overwhelming. It can feel like you're trying to eat an elephant, and you start to wonder, A, can I even reach the top? And B, is it even worth trying? Can anyone relate to this? Okay. This is why so many perfectionists second guess themselves, or even worse, don't even try. Okay. Whereas high achievers, on the other hand, they're not focused on achieving that specific outcome. They know the top of the mountain is there, right? They've got high standards, but their focus is on what they're doing right now, the next step and the next step. This is where their time and energy is going. And as a result, they are 10 times more likely to reach the top of that mountain than the perfectionist. 10 times more likely, okay? And here's the kicker, okay? Almost all of the high achievers will reach the summit, compared to about 20% of perfectionists who don't even make it past base camp, okay? They're waiting for the perfect weather, the perfect exercise regimen, the perfect time of year, the perfect guide, right? There's always a reason to procrastinate and wait. Anyone can relate, right? There's always a reason to wait. And so, as I mentioned just a moment ago, I want to go into more detail about this process, right? I want to share with you 3 key questions to help you move from this perfection paralysis and hopefully navigate that mountain a little bit quicker and with greater success, okay? Now, if you haven't been taking notes, I do encourage you to write these down. because this is what I use when I'm working directly with clients. And you can use it in many different areas of your life whenever you're finding yourself stuck or procrastinating. Okay. The first question, does it really matter? Okay. So using the mountain metaphor, right? Does the time of year really matter when you're climbing a mountain? Well, no, yes, it does, right? Yes, it does. But what about everything else? Does it really matter if you spend 5 hours researching the best hiking boots on the internet? Probably not, right? So remember how we talked earlier about values, right? Being aligned with your values. This question is helping to remind us of that. Does this really matter? Is this really aligned with my values? Okay. For example, does it really matter if you have the perfectly crafted elevator pitch that's delivered perfectly and wows everyone, right? No. What really matters is the process of showing up and trying. Now, right here is where my clients will usually give me like but I can't show up unprepared, right? And I love to ask them why. What will happen if you do, right? And this leads us to the next question. What's the worst that can happen, right? Once we've asked, does it really matter? The next question, what's the worst that can happen? Now, when I ask a client this, they usually give me a vague response at first, right? I'll usually get like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, no, what? I don't know. It won't be good. And I'm like, what? What won't be good? Oh, something bad might happen. And I'm like what? What will actually happen? I don't know. I might get embarrassed. How? You see how that happens, right? We like to stay in this vague, ambivalent place of confusion because it is safe, right? It doesn't feel comfortable to be in confusion, but as long as we're here, we are safe from having to make a decision and take action. So this question, right? What's the worst that can happen? It forces you to step out of confusion, hypothetically make a decision, and imagine the action you would take. It also forces you to name your fear. Now, there is great power in naming your fear, the thing that's stopping you from taking action. This process is used in literature all the time. Just as an example, part of Harry Potter's character arc came when he stopped calling he who must not be named by his name of Voldemort, right? He learned to name his fear. And we need to name our fears if we have any hopes of challenging it directly. Which brings us to the third question. Whatever happens, can I handle it? Okay. This question forces perfectionists to think about the skills and experiences they have to handle these tough situations. It's almost like we deliberately ignore the value that we bring to the table. And we need to answer this question to force us to step out of confusion and into problem solving and force us to remember the things that we actually already know how to do. Okay. This also helps us focus on the process of doing something rather than that specific outcome that we're holding onto tightly. So for example, can I handle it if I forget a part of my elevator pitch, right? Now I have to think about all the ways I've handled conversations in the past. I have to think about the skills I've used and what I could do or say in the moment, right? I'm no longer obsessing about that end outcome of delivering the perfect elevator pitch. I'm focused in the present moment of interacting and trying to connect with another human being. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, this sounds simple enough, right? Perfectionism, maybe it's not such a big deal. And I get it, right? Many years ago, I thought that too. And so do many other people. Now, for privacy reasons, I can't share their names with you, but I wanted to share the stories of some of the people I've worked with. Let's just call our first perfectionist in recovery, Sarah, okay? Sarah wanted to market her hand-painted products into the world, and every year she set the intention and made her New Year's resolution that she was going to launch her big idea. 5 years came and went before she finally sat down and forced herself to answer those 3 key questions. Does it really matter? What's the worst that can happen? And whatever happens, can I handle it? And when she did, she finally got over those obstacles that were holding her back and launched an amazing business. Then there was Jill. She kind of fell into the perfectionism struggle when she got married. So suddenly she found herself being super critical of her family and her kids. She realized that she was holding them up to the same unrealistic high standards that she had for herself. And this really impacted her health, her happiness, and obviously her family relationships. Right? And sometimes this kind of perfectionism can end in divorce. Sometimes it ends in burnout, like with my client, Samantha. She had to step down from the board of directors of 2 of the charities that she was working on because of burnout. Her perfectionism meant that she couldn't delegate tasks to others, right? Because she was the only one who could do it the right way. And because of that, she couldn't keep up with what needed to be done. She couldn't complete it to the standard that she expected of herself and others. And she started to burn out. She lost passion for the work. She felt so guilty for letting down the charities, and this led to depression. Okay. So perfectionism may have worked for you up until this point, but just imagine if you made that small move to, instead of thinking like a perfectionist, you're thinking more like a high achiever. Again, if you remember from the studies, they outperform perfectionists each and every time, right? And they have less stress and burnout. So perfectionism, this fear of being judged, this fear of losing control, stops you from launching your big dreams and your ideas. It puts you in a constant spiral of starting and stopping projects and programs. It stops you from putting yourself out there and sharing your talents. It causes you to obsess about all the details of the work and neglect the actions that actually impact the bottom line, that actually move your ideas forward. In your relationships, perfectionism causes people to people please, right? They're afraid of disappointing others. Or it can cause you to be very critical and judgmental of others because you feel more irritated and annoyed that they're not living up to these high standards. In home, right? Perfectionism can cause you to clean and organize and have everything just right, instead of attending to what really matters in your home, which are the relationships with the ones you love. Can any of you guys relate to any of these struggles? Right? As I mentioned earlier, 1 in 5 of us are chronic procrastinators, an insidious sign of perfectionism. Or perhaps you're a perfectionist in recovery, right? Like I am. Many of us are afraid, right? We're scared that if we stop being perfectionists, we're going to let ourselves go and things are going to start failing right and left. Okay. But that's not what happens. If you guys remember Samantha, who I mentioned earlier, she had to step down from the board of directors of the 2 charities she was working with. Well, when she came to work with me, she felt like a complete failure. The not good enough syndrome was in full force. And as we worked together, she started to realize that a lot of the decisions and choices that she had made in her life were based on trying to avoid being judged and criticized by others. Right? So she learned to identify her own values, not the values imposed on her by her family and her coworkers and society, but the values that she chose because they aligned with her sense of well-being. She learned to stop trying to control what others thought of her or how things turned out. Right? She learned to focus on making decisions and taking actions regardless of what that end outcome might be. And by the end of our work together, she finally went on a cruise by herself, guilt-free. She wrote her memoir. She's been talking about writing her book for 15 years. She finally wrote it. She reconnected with her estranged son. She moved into a better housing situation. She stopped always starting and stopping taking classes and courses and finally started implementing what she learned. And this time she put her focus into working with charities that she personally valued. And this helped her feel free and unencumbered to launch her ideas. Anyone want a piece of that? All right. Anyone want some of that in your life? I know I do. All right. So as I promised at the beginning, I do have a guidebook. I call it the #1 mindset shift to go from spinning your wheels and chasing bright, shiny objects to launching your big idea into the world boldly and confidently. And it's just a PDF guidebook. The link is there. It's also on the event page. And it builds on what we've discovered here today, right? So it talks about how overcoming that perfection paralysis and going after your big ideas. It builds on the 3 questions. It has a 4th question that I like to have my clients work with, and a printable worksheet to kind of make it easy to work through those questions in less than 5 minutes a day. Whenever you feel stuck, you just pull that out, talk yourself through it. It takes less than 5 minutes. And this is for anyone who wants it. But thank you all for giving me of your time and attention today. And we have about 10 minutes for any Q&A, any questions or follow-up that anyone might have. I'm gonna stop the share so I can see our Q&A chat. Hey. All right. Looks like we don't have any questions coming in. I just want to, tips. Do we have any tips on doing weekly to-do lists? Yes, I do. Okay. So when I work with perfectionists, the weekly to-do list can easily turn into what I call a stress diary. And that's not very helpful, right? Everyone's like, so you're keeping a stress diary of all the things you need to do, but you haven't done. And so when people are creating the weekly to-do lists, it depends on where you're at, okay? Everyone's a little bit different, but I like to have my clients start with the bare minimum, okay? I call this minimum baseline. So the idea being like, I want to exercise every day. I'm like, okay, what is the bare minimum? Let's say you took a long flight across the Atlantic Ocean with the time change difference. You checked into the hotel and you just want to crash on the bed because you're so tired. What is the bare minimum, right? And the client will be like, well, I can do 3 jumping jacks in the bathroom before I go to bed. I'm like, okay, that is your minimum baseline. That no matter how bad things get, you make an agreement to like, I'm going to do this bare minimum. And then I'm like, all right, 7 days in a week. How often do you think you can hit that target in a week? Some clients will be like, oh, every single day. And I'm like, really? Let's be honest. We're like, maybe 5 out of the 7 days. I'm like, okay, there's your baseline. So you start to set up an idea of what is your baseline in terms of the tasks you do, because this is very important in the long run. If you schedule something on your calendar, on your to-do list, and you don't do it, what you're training your brain, right? Your brain's learning, it's picking up on this, is that I can't keep promises to myself. I don't keep promises to myself. So my recommendation is to make sure that when you're putting things on your to-do list, that it's something that you realistically can follow through on. That you're not just like, oh, these are all the goals. And so I actually keep 3 to-do lists. I have my now, next, and later. I use the Google task manager. And in my now, I only put like those top of mind urgent things where I know I have to get it done and I will get it done, okay? My next, those are all the things that I have a little bit more wiggle room. I know I will get it done. I have a little bit more flexibility. And my later, these are the ideas that I don't want to forget about, right? Things that I want to do, but I don't want to forget about. And when I do that, I teach myself that if it's on my now list, it gets done no matter what. And I'm teaching myself that I can keep a promise to myself. The other 2 lists, I have a little bit more wiggle room. And it helps me kind of separate out, like I'm not just keeping a stress diary of all the things I have to do. And then I had another client, I just want to throw this out there. She kept making these lists and she comes to me, she's like, look, all the things on my next, right now, next, and later, she's like, it never gets done. I always have something that gets put on now that takes precedent. And all these things on my next list just keep getting pushed back. And I asked her, so take them off the list. She's like, I can't take it off. What would it mean to just take it off the list? Like you've been saying that you wanted to reorganize your hallway closet for 4 weeks now, and you've never had the time to get to do it. Can we just take it off the table? Just stop doing it. And she had that moment of like, it never occurred to her to take something off. So silly example for me. I went through a 3-month period where folding laundry was not on my to-do list. Our dining room table was a pile of laundry because I did not have the bandwidth or the time or the energy to fold clothes and put it away. I told my kids, you need clothes, go take a dive into the pile on the kitchen table, find what you need, put it on. And it took a good 3 or 4 months before I finally got myself to a place where I now had time and energy. And the thing is I didn't keep that on my to-do list. I gave myself permission to take it off my to-do list, to no longer stress myself out about it. And I used those same questions, right? Does it really matter? No, it doesn't. They're still dressed. The laundry still gets done. What's the worst that can happen? Someone walk in and think I'm a messy person. Okay, that's their issue, not mine. You know, if this happens, can I handle it? Yeah, clearly we've been handling it just fine. So it kind of took that pressure off. Okay, so there's lots of things that you can do on your to-do list. So we actually do a whole class on that. But I hope some of those tips kind of helped you kind of wrap your mind around where to start, right? Focusing on now and next, highlighting your values, and asking yourself if there's anything here that you can actually remove. Great question. Any other questions? Awesome. All right. Thank you, Fabian. I appreciate that. If you guys think of anything, you can feel free to reach out on social media if any other questions or things come to mind. I love kind of teaching. That's what brings me joy. Again, I appreciate everyone's time here. Thank you so much for coming today.